Morning. Welcome to the ADM Institute for the Prevention of Post-Harvest Losses webinar series. My name is Samantha Lindgren. I'm an assistant professor of sustainability education in the College of Education here at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. I'm happy to be the moderator of today's panel on the importance of capacity building in post-harvest management. The ADMI Institute for the Prevention of Post-Harvest Loss at the University of Illinois has spent the last decade promoting innovations, pioneering post-harvest food systems research, and building capacity towards better post-harvest management. Founded in 2011 with a generous gift from ADM, the Institute's mission is to promote research, outreach, education, and capacity building on tools, techniques, institutions, and policies to reduce post-harvest losses in grains and oilseeds in order to promote food security, poverty alleviation, and environmental sustainability. This webinar series commemorates the Institute's 10-year anniversary by bringing together experts from universities, research institutions, nonprofits, and the private sector to share best practices, lessons learned, and priorities in post-harvest loss prevention. To lose more, visit our website. Today's webinar is focused on strengthening institutional and human capacity, which is a less addressed topic in promoting adoption of better post-harvest management. National and local research institutions, nonprofits, and farmer cooperatives play critical roles in extension, knowledge sharing, farmer training, and enabling change. In today's webinar, we will have 3 speakers who will highlight their experiences in building post-harvest specific capacity at the grassroots and farmer level, at the trainer level, and at the institutional level. Our speakers for the day include Dr. Madhu Viswanathan, Dr. Lisa Kitinoja, and Dr. Paul McNamara. As a reminder, today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on the ADMI website. We encourage you to post about this webinar using the social media handles that you can find in the chat. We hope to make today's session as interactive as possible, so to that end, please do use the chat box for questions and comments. I'd now like to turn this over to Maria Jones to get us started.
Thank you, Sam. Hello, everybody. We're going to start today's webinar with a quick interactive chat. Please look for the link in the chat. You should be able to participate in this poll by going to www.menti.com and using the code 4380093. What is one thing COVID-19 has revealed about addressing food security issues? Thank you for your participation. I think we're getting some really good responses. Thank you. Supply chains are fragile, how mobility restrictions can increase food loss, about linking people who are vulnerable and so many people who are to system-wide shocks like COVID-19. Thank you. Please keep inputting your responses and we will move on to the first presenter.
Thank you, Maria. Our first speaker this morning is Dr. Madhu Viswanathan, who is a professor of marketing in the College of Business Administration at Loyola Marymount University and professor emeritus at the University of Illinois here in Urbana-Champaign. The title of his talk today is Domain-Specific Marketplace Literacy and Post-Harvest Loss Prevention. Madhu, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Is my sound okay? Is there any background noise? I just want to make sure. Excellent. So I'm just so honored to be here because I've just benefited so much from ADMI, and I want to thank Alex, Maria, Sarah, the entire team. It's been a long journey, and it's been wonderful to be part of this journey with you. So thank you for inviting me. I see great colleagues like Paul, and then also Bruce in the audience, and I want to welcome the participants around the world. I was at the University of Illinois for 3 decades and live in Champaign, but now I'm at Loyola Marymount University. And I wanted to speak to you from a very outside perspective. I'm a professor in marketing, business administration, and I just wanted to give you a very different perspective, truly from somebody who's a novice in agricultural issues, but I hope this is of value to you. The one term you will keep hearing from me, and this very well organized session starts with the micro. It fits perfectly with what has been my own approach, which is bottom up. Start at the micro and start with people and so on. And that's been symbolized by this stream of work that I've been privileged to start, which doesn't look at poverty and marketplaces necessarily at the 30,000 feet altitude or even the 10,000 feet altitude, but starts with people, customers, entrepreneurs, etc., and how they interact and how they think and feel and relate in the marketplace. And then from that, try to enable bottom-up understanding. So that's been our approach. So it fits perfectly with starting micro. And we call this subsistence marketplaces. The idea is they are pre-existing marketplaces that we can learn from, rather than just new markets where we already have the solutions for. That's part of being bottom-up. And this is symbolized by this type of upside down iceberg. And the idea is when you are bottom up, you see the rest of the iceberg, and you also can create some momentum as well in what you do. And it's also been a unique enterprise, which I hope will appeal to our practitioners, that it's really been about practice going hand in hand with research and education. It's been about looking at how people do business in much of humanity across the world, which often we neglect at business schools, creating education for communities through marketplace literacy, and creating education about them for our students and managers and so on. So that's really been our journey. I also wanted to point out that we created this notion and then evolved it called marketplace literacy, which really emphasizes know why. More than just what to buy or sell or how to buy or sell, it's also why, such as why should I choose a business? Why should I understand the value chain if I'm a farmer? Why should I add value to my crops? Why should I, store and protect them versus just giving them away, right? So understanding the why. It also covers a broader domain of consumer, entrepreneur, and in the marketplace, rather than focusing just say on consumer education. And the way we've gone about it is bottom up as well. And so marketplace literacy is not basic literacy, it's consumer, entrepreneurial, sustainability literacy. It's about the knowledge and skills, and not only what to buy or sell, but how and why. And the way we've done this education is by concretizing the content, localizing it, and by bringing in the social relationships that people naturally have in order to teach each other and so on. And so I would just say with marketplace literacy, it's about these different elements, and it's both sides of marketing or marketplaces, and it's more than training. So the know why is really more than training. It's a deeper understanding. So we really focus on education that can enable people beyond training, and we use a variety of different methods to get there. And right now we are at the phase of saying in the last few years, to whom? And interestingly, we work mostly a lot with farmers when we talk about specific occupations, thanks to ADMI, and through what mode, for example, virtual, in-person, and so on. And I'll show you a couple of examples of that. We have been trying to be innovative by using video-based approaches without an actual physical teacher, with facilitators in a number of different contexts, to try to scale what we've been trying to do as well. So in terms of the effects of marketplace, we see with 3 large-scale field experiments, We have found that marketplace literacy is related to, and this is with farmers, we found that marketplace literacy is related to personal well-being. It also increases consumer confidence and decision-making. It also leads to entrepreneurial startups and entrepreneurial intention as well. So these are some of the things we are finding. In terms of the way we are approaching it, more recently with the pandemic, we focused on virtual content and delivery, which means thinking of ways in which we can send out, let's say, image diary based, WhatsApp clips. So we worked with ADMI on some of these things for farmers. And the idea there is they could be reinforcing, they could stimulate discussions, particularly if virtually we can bring people together as well. And you'll see that, quite a bit of this is, virtual content is also bottom up. Let me make sure the sound works here, but let's try this.
Many farmers will sell their crops immediately after they harvest. Some farmers will actually make changes to those crops and add value to their crops before selling them. Why does that happen, and how does it happen? Think about it. Some farmers are able to raise their profit by drying and packing the crops right after they harvest.
So, for example, we have a variety of clips on this topic, and you'll see that we don't tell people. We use their own reality and their experience to generate questions that they think about, and this could be used in concert with an in-person program. It could be used in a lot of other ways as well. So this is just one example. And again, in our work with ADMI, and here's another, just a small clip, and these could be a series of clips. They are narrow bandwidth and easy to send out. And you could even have clips where you have the facilitator guiding people through a process. So this is playable clips so that people who are virtually connected with the facilitator could actually, have a more of a meaningful class with discussions and so on. So I'm not here to say that just sending out a clip or sending out a video is education. It's not. It's the ability to engage people.
Hello, everybody. Although there are different methods to store grains, one important method involves using gunny sacks. Many different grains like rice and wheat can be stored in sacks. After harvest, it is important to dry the grains so they have the right amount of moisture. To the extent possible, it is good to use new sacks to store grains. If this isn't possible, the older bags need to be sprayed with pesticides. Sacks should not be closely stacked together during.
So you get a sense of this, and so again, we feel like we found this spot between doing a variety of different things, including high bandwidth videos, where we feel like we can convey this both as reinforcing lessons, as stimulating discussion, and something that can be coupled with in-person training as well. And so this is some of what we've been thinking about doing. Other than that, I also wanted to mention that thanks to ADMI support, we've looked at customized education based on regional effects of climate change. And this to me is an extraordinarily important topic. What are the regional current and projected effects of climate change, whether it's drought in one area or other aspects in different areas? And how could we go about creating some education that helps those at the bottom to understand the issues and see what they can do about it, and perhaps even what they can advocate for. And so, in this sense, here are a couple of examples. And the way we approach it is we think of 4 levels. Well, what is climate change? How does it impact agriculture for you regionally? How does it affect agriculture and marketplaces? And what are some bottom-up insights and actions? And this is just one example of one of my favorite tasks in marketplace literacy, where we give people a set of pictures and ask them what's the most important, either to be a farmer, who to me is an entrepreneur really, or or to run a business.
2 more minutes left.
And people will often say that it is it's money, and through discussion, even a farmer has to realize that in the end, it's the customer, right? And farmer is in that sense, really running a business. And so this is just one example of the kind of task that we use as well. And we were also at the point of, having some, brochures, which really lay out in detail what we're finding in different settings. So what's the environmental challenge scenario? What's the effect on agriculture? What's the effect on agriculture and marketplaces? We will never pretend to be experts in anything, let alone agriculture, but we hope that where we can contribute is at the intersection of agriculture and marketplaces as well. And so this is an example of some of the things that we are developing in this space, thanks to the support from ADMI as well. So that's what I wanted to say. I wanted to leave you with the idea that from an outside of agriculture perspective, the notion of being bottom up in a true sense, the notion of essentially thinking of marketplace literacy, which is providing people with a deeper understanding that helps them to learn how to learn, and then thinking of innovative methods of reaching them during and after the pandemic as well through such virtual content. And finally, the idea of customizing this type of education for climate change related issues in terms of how it translates to them. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Madhu. Our next speaker today is Dr. Lisa Kitinoja, a private consultant in international horticultural development and the founder of the nonprofit organization, the Postharvest Education Foundation. Her talk today is titled Informal Post-Harvest Capacity Building, Training of Trainers, Extension Education, and Post-Harvest Training and Service Centers. Lisa, we're so glad you could be here today.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. And it's amazing to realize that 10 years have passed since ADMI was launched, and PEF was launched the same year. So it's very exciting to have an anniversary. I'm happy to provide some information today on some of the work that we've been doing in the informal sector on post-harvest capacity building. I'm going to talk about training of trainers and our e-learning program, and then some of our extension service support and capacity building via the use of post-harvest training and services centers. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we noticed early in the development of the foundation was that training in post-harvest handling was often focused on problems that were faced in developing countries. And if people could find training, it was being offered at very high prices at universities or in research centers in developed countries. So people in Africa and Asia, Latin America found it very difficult to access that training and lacked the financial resources to be able to participate. So to address this, the Post-Harvest Education Foundation developed low-cost approach that was a series of assignments that we called our Training of Trainers program. And the target group were extension workers who would then be able to use this to do their work. Next. We decided to use an e-learning platform for a few reasons. One, it was extremely inexpensive compared to the live approaches that we had been trying. Workshops and short courses, they were always priced in the thousands of dollars and limited the number of people we could reach. So e-learning was a very effective way to reach all the other people, and especially those living in places that were far from traditional training programs. So they gained even more use and importance for us this last few years during the pandemic, because sometimes that was the only way we could reach people at all. Next slide. So our foundation was launched in 2011, and we decided that our mission was to provide educational programs that could motivate and empower people to reduce food loss and waste. And our target group basically was young people who had gotten a formal education, but now needed practical education and some field experience so that they could get work, they could get hired for jobs, they could take consultancies, they could start their own businesses, etc. So next slide. Our goals were very simple, and we've been able to manage all of these, to achieve all of these. We're conducting the e-learning programs. It was initially on an annual basis. Now it's just a start whenever you want basis. We were providing free access to all kinds of training materials. So we have videos, publications, manuals. We provide access to tools and basic equipment, so those doing field work or research can do their work properly. And then we're offering long-term mentoring, mostly through LinkedIn and other social networking websites. And then finally, we're providing advice and guidance because we are promoting the establishment of local post-harvest training and service centers. And these, I'll speak a little bit more about them, but they would be a perfect place to do this market literacy kind of training. Next slide. I don't have much time this morning to talk to you, so I'll just give you the website of the foundation, and you can go get all of these as free downloads. We encourage people sharing them, using them to design their own training programs, using them as resources, and learning more about all of the topics. Pardon? So the key element of our training is the training of trainers manual, and that's the resource that we focus on the most. We're teaching about loss assessment, costs and benefits of improving practices and post-harvest technologies. There's assignments on designing programs, and then there's a series on the post-harvest training and service center design. So anyone is welcome to take this program, and it can take anywhere from a few months to a full year to go through all the assignments. And you get feedback whenever needed, and you can focus on whatever crop you're interested in. You can learn about your own local situation, and then come up with potential solutions for any problems that you find, and then develop materials that will address those. Next. So far, we have reached some individuals in some 30 countries, and mostly South Asia and Africa. The areas that we did the most, we reached the most people were those where we got some support from USAID to set up training and service centers. But we've got people from all over. So it's been really exciting for me to work with so many interesting individuals and be able to help them achieve helping their own local communities. So next. The training and service centers, we envision as a site, a location in a community where the extension services and tools can be accessed. So having a way to bring the community together, it can be very simple places. They're not expensive buildings and locations, but a place where you can put up demos, have a small shop to sell supplies. For example, if you're teaching about food processing, people will need packaging supplies. So that's the idea of the service center, is to fill that need. So we have a few of these set up already in Tanzania, Rwanda. There's one in Burkina Faso. There's a few coming up in Uganda that are being funded by a company in Germany. And we have one funded by the USDA that was set up in the USA in Alabama. Next slide. The centers that have been set up in Rwanda are an interesting bunch because they're being managed by 3 different organizations. One is being managed by a university, one is being managed by a government entity, an export board, and the third is being managed by an NGO. So it's a unique way to think about how you can get this information out to the local community. Anyone interested in more can find a page on our website that shows you all kinds of examples and methods. Next slide. I just wanted to say a few things about some of our e-learning graduates. Dr. Odeyemi in Nigeria was one of our first Cater Award winners, and she has set up her own training facility. And Angelique Umohoro in Rwanda was a graduate in 2017. She's founded her own NGO. Is Angelique here today? I don't hear anything, so I'll talk about, she was going to join us and talk about her experience, but I can go through her slides with you. Her organization is called the Food Sustainability Initiative, and she focuses on both post-harvest training and nutrition. Next slide. She was very interested in taking the e-learning training because she noticed that in her local community, the farmers and the processors were not getting any training from Extension. Extension was focusing almost only on production. So she and her close colleagues put together a plan, and they received their certificate for as an NGO in 2019. They're going to be working with building capacity in Rwanda to improve food and nutritional security. Next. So 2 main things they've worked on to date. One was to do a potato post-harvest loss assessment, where they went out and talked with farmers and found out what their issues were. And then they developed a training program that would target exactly those problems and help reduce potato losses in storage. Next. Angelique and her husband, Bernard, both received the training and were both acknowledged by PEF for their excellent work. Next. Right now, they have a new project that's supporting households to improve their business in agribusiness post-harvest. So they're helping people design and launch small businesses that focus on improving food and nutrition security in Rwanda. So next. So my concluding slide is just, we've reached about 180 people and trained them as post-harvest specialists in 10 years, but literally we need thousands more. So we'll be continuing that work, and we've put out a book on the topic that you can access. We hope that anybody who's interested will avail themselves of the training. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, for sharing that with us this morning. Our last speaker today is Dr. Paul McNamara. a professor in the Department of Agricultural and Consumer Economics here at the University of Illinois. He is also an adjunct professor at Njala University in Sierra Leone in the Department of Agribusiness. He is also the director of AgReach, a program of development action and research aimed at reducing gaps in agri-systems to promote smallholder farmers. The title of his talk today is Building University Capacity in Post-Harvest Loss Prevention, the Partnership Approach of Njala University and the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Paul, thanks so much.
Paul, I think you're muted.
Thank you, Maria. I first have to find the unmute button. Very good. Good morning, everyone. Good evening to friends in Asia, and good afternoon to friends in Africa. Very good to see so many familiar names and names of friends. Let me just get this set up. It's going to take me a second. Okay, very good. I'm going to talk about our approach to institutional capacity development that we have with Njala University. And the main point I want to make is the approach we have here is a little unique. And the argument is that a long-term partnership relationship is potentially a really good way to do institutional capacity development in a specific domain like post-harvest loss prevention. And so I'm going to introduce the partnership we have, introduce our experimental training hub that we have at Njala with the post-harvest loss focus, and give you one example of a student project and student engagement that came out of it, but we have lots of different examples of things. So that's where I'm going with this. The main argument is that a long-term partnership for a number of reasons is a great way to do institutional capacity development compared to one-off engagements that tend to be short 1 or 2 or 3 year type of engagements that are common in development. So this experimental training hub at Njala for post-harvest loss builds on a long-term relationship between University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign and Njala University. It goes back to the 1960s. And in the mid-60s, Njala University was created with USAID funding. Illinois was the implementing partner who established that university. And so we had Illinois faculty and staff resident in Sierra Leone for a number of years. We also trained a number of Sierra Leoneans. Some of them became very influential in global agriculture. And they got their degrees, PhDs and master's degrees from University of Illinois at that time. So there was a partnership established. And after the war, as I think many of you know, Sierra Leone suffered a terrible war in the 1990s, a 10-year-long civil conflict. Extremely damaging, and institutions like universities were severely affected. After the war, the University of Illinois re-engaged with Njala more deliberately beginning in the late 2000s. And we reestablished a partnership based on a number of key values, one of which was mutual gains. So it wasn't sort of a one-sided, we're going to give you things or you're going to give us things. We're both going to get things that we need as academic institutions out of this partnership. And that could look like training opportunities and educational opportunities for junior staff at Njala to benefit from University of Illinois, but it could look like support for research activities in partnership on the ground in Sierra Leone, or it could be hosting study abroad opportunities for Illinois students to be a part of. So mutual gains, reciprocity, and I think importantly, multiple points of contact among both faculties. So not just me, but a number of different faculty at Illinois involved and same on the Njala side. And that's important because a lot of development academic partnerships understandably are person to person between faculty, friends, and colleagues. And it's built on a long-term relationship with repeated interactions and history. And so if you think about the logic of that kind of partnership from a game theoretic perspective, there's a lot of benefits, but just from a doing business, the repeated interactions in the history, when done well, creates a lot of trust and lines of communication that the experimental hub builds on. Here are some examples of the kinds of things in the partnership. First, we helped create the agribusiness program at Njala, but we twinned it with a study abroad program at Illinois. So we helped create a degree at Njala, which is now the largest degree within their College of Agriculture. And on the Illinois side, it's a study abroad opportunity for a short-term program and a semester-long program. So here's a picture of a field trip we organized for Njala students and Illinois students, led by the director at that time for Archer Daniel Midland's company, the cocoa business in Africa, Mohamedou Khan, who's a graduate of the business school at the University of Illinois, the Gee School. And we brought Mohamedou over to Sierra Leone to run a trip. But these are the kinds of things that we can facilitate in the partnership, both that benefit our students, but also benefit Njala University students with a lot more active experiential education options than they would have normally. And so that's one example. Another example is numerous partnership activities around training, all different kinds of topics, from technology topics to agribusiness and ag development, food security, and post-harvest loss prevention. But we've been doing these for about 12 years now and have done many of them. And so workshops and training. Another important domain is several of the Illinois faculty, Professor Cook pictured here, myself and a few others, serve as outside readers or mentors, research mentors for faculty at Njala who have a master's degree but are working on their PhD degree to obtain their PhD degree. And we've brought a number of them over to Illinois to spend a year or 2 years taking courses at Illinois and then completing their PhD at Njala University, but with one of us serving as either a research director or an outside reader on the committee. This is a substantial investment of University of Illinois resources into this partnership, but it's a very long-term commitment. Obviously, training a faculty person to the PhD level is a 30 to 40 year kind of investment, and it's going to benefit that university for a long time. And we have done quite a bit of this. Another domain where we've worked together is a whole slew of funded activities. From USAID funding, we've received and had Njala as an implementing partner to Department of State and UK DFID funding, public post-harvest loss prevention activities in the hub that I'll talk about in a moment. And then we work together routinely to develop funding proposals for research, teaching, and service activities together. So this is an important aspect of our partnership. And then lastly, especially emphasized by COVID, the ability to do distance education, to have virtual lectures and seminars is a huge benefit for Njala. Here's a picture of a class I'm teaching right now, an agribusiness class. I have 63 students in it in Sierra Leone, and it's a modified version of a course I teach at Illinois, but here's this. Thank you. And so we do this. We have a number of other online activities. So what kind of metrics for building institutional capacity in post-harvest loss prevention? You can think of them at the faculty level. What kind of faculty engagement, knowledge, capacity do we have? what are students receiving and learning and getting access to in terms of experiential and technical knowledge, how are courses integrating PHL into it, what research outputs you're seeing, and then what development impacts. And so we've developed the Experimental Hub. It's a small program of research in action. We have a lot of student engagements. We have run workshops. Here's a picture of an extension campaign we ran in a number of chiefdoms on post-harvest loss prevention and food safety. And then field research, we have a field experiment underway, and then design and testing of different post-harvest loss prevention technologies and working with businesses on those. And Brad Brinkley's on the seminar. Here's one example of a student project with Illinois students and Njala students. They did a cocoa post-harvest loss analysis. And here's their team, Illinois students, Njala students. This was last spring. It was on the Illinois side, a virtual study abroad course. On the Njala side, it was part of their agribusiness program. And they organized a research project to evaluate some post-harvest loss prevention activities that were done by NGOs previously. And here are their objectives. They studied the implementation process of this NGO technologies, looked at adoption, determined the sustainability, and whether farmers identified benefits. And the students, our students couldn't travel, of course, because of COVID restrictions, but the Njala students implemented the survey in the field. Here's the Njala team. On their way out to the field, they went down in southern Sierra Leone and implemented a survey with farmers, growers. So the students working together learn a lot about research, answering a client's question, developing it, but they're also learning about post-harvest loss. And here are some things. They were examining these dryers that were promoted and how useful they were and some of the sustainability issues around the dryers for cocoa. And so to wrap up, and here are some pictures of the students in the field. We have a lot of different examples of this, but this embedding post-harvest loss into a longer-term institution-to-institution partnership can lead to good capacity gains for students, faculty, and staff in the academic setting. And we're nurturing this partnership, and we're interested to get more evidence about the sustainability of the capacity gains we've seen, and also the development impacts with farmers we're interacting with, and with some of the private sector dealers and agents that have been a part of trainings. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And Lisa and Madhu, thank you as well for sharing these informative and inspiring talks this morning. We now have a little time for questions. And so I'd like to remind all of you in the audience that you can submit questions to all three or just one of our speakers this morning. And while you form those questions, I'll ask one to get started that I see in the chat box already. This is from Dr. Winter Nelson. In the domain of post-harvest management in the countries that you all work in, is there a problem of identifying appropriate content to deliver, or are there plenty of proven context-appropriate technologies and practices to offer farmers and trainers? So this question's for all three of you. If one of you is ready to answer, please just unmute yourself and jump right in.
Yeah, I would just say that I believe that the marketplace literacy for farmers, the way we design it, is quite unique. As I mentioned, I think that the thing is that we want that deeper understanding. And we also want to think of the farmer as an entrepreneur and get them to understand very broadly. And, the approach of being bottom up as well. So we really think we are just at beginning to create that kind of content. Obviously, it's self-serving for me to say, but I would compare us to, say, training a farmer about how to use pesticide versus, educating a farmer about the entire marketplace. Both are important, don't get me wrong, but we are in the latter space. Thank you.
Great. I've been working with my colleagues to compile the kind of materials that are needed. And that's one of our activities, is to publish manuals and books and brochures and videos and all of that. So I think there is plenty of targeted information lower cost, smaller scale, all the way up through the mid-moderate scale and high-tech stuff that people can pick and choose from. But being able to know the costs versus the benefits is one of the factors that a good trainer has to be able to do. They have to know what to teach that will actually solve a problem without creating new problems or being too expensive for the audience.
Yeah, this is Paul McNamara. I'd like to also address Alex's question about appropriate content to deliver. I think one of the key challenges we're seeing, at least in Sierra Leone, which is kind of a unique market, is sort of supply side gaps, where maybe in another country you might have technologies like meters or bags commonly available, but in Sierra Leone, maybe because the market's thin, or maybe it just haven't received too much attention by suppliers, the availability off the shelf of simple technologies like PICS bags or other hermetic sealed bags or other things like this are just really hard to obtain. And when you can get them, they're, in our opinion, exorbitantly priced. And so, we see that the context isn't just our technologies like known. It's can you go to an agro shop and buy it, and can you buy it when you need it? Like right now is rice harvest in West Africa, and people would want to store for 5 months or 7 months. So you need a lot of bags, and it's difficult to locate them. So I think that depends on the context, Alex. And in some countries, at least, easy technologies, simple technologies are difficult to locate.
Thanks, all three of you. Paul, as long as we have you, there's a question in the chat specifically for you about the nature of the relationship between Njala and the University of Illinois, specifically around the relationship between any other areas outside of agribusiness, like math or business or nutrition. I'll let you answer Tanya's question if you see it.
Sure. I think one of parts of Tanya's question is, how do you fund this? And I would just say that like in Lisa or Madhu's activities, I'm sure there's quite a bit of sweat equity in these enterprises. And so in the nature of this partnership is that on both sides, faculty have contributed a lot of energy and time and effort to make things happen. The university has supported funds for travel on our side, and we've used university funds also to help host Njala faculty and leaders to come to Illinois. So there have been some contributions there, but I think the key contribution has been faculty time and energy and attention. And then frankly, we're leveraging an enormous amount of energy from students. Students provide so much energy and a lot of power and enthusiasm is brought by student teams and student groups. So that's another aspect. And on the Illinois side, the study abroad activities are fee-based. So there's student fees that go to cover those Illinois students. When you see a picture of an Illinois student at Njala, you know, they're paying a fee to participate in that program. So a number of different sources are paying for it. And but I'd say a big part of it is contributed faculty effort, which clearly has its limits.
Very well said. If you don't mind, Samantha, I wanted to add, I couldn't agree more with Paul. And in many ways, you have to complicate the revenue model, including what constitutes revenue. You know, social value is revenue for many of us, of course. And so I think you really have to complicate it, which sounds good in you know, as a phrase, but then there are some issues there as well, because we then entangle a lot of different stakeholders and we need to look out for all of them. And so let us say a student thesis is involved. We have to make sure that the partners continue to partner with us. So that's part of it. In my case, the nonprofit is distinct But nevertheless, I couldn't agree more with Paul. And I hope that one of the bigger messages is there are folks here, we really, we are passionate about this and care deeply. And that's a big part of sustaining or making it sustainable. Thank you, Samantha.
Yeah, can I just chime in, because the Post-Harvest Training and Services Center model was designed in order to be self-sustaining. And one of the ways that it does that is by selling the small supplies and tools and bags for storage and packaging supplies and all of those things that the community has such a difficult time finding and accessing. So we were actually at the end of some of our training programs, training PTSC managers to be procurement agents and wholesale buyers, and all of the things that you need to do to run a small business in ag supply, but all focused on post-harvest aspects.
Thanks, Lisa. We've got another question in the chat, and this is for all three of you. What is one piece of advice that you could give the participants in today's webinar in terms of integrating post-harvest management training into existing training for farmers, extension workers, or institutions?
I'll defer to Paul and Lisa on this.
Okay, I'm going to need you to repeat the question because I'm writing an answer to Tanya in the chat. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Paul. Multitasking. Maria's question is, what's one piece of advice that you could give today's participants with regards to integrating post-harvest management training into existing training programs for farmers, extension workers, or other institutions?
I have a couple thoughts. I think Lisa's got some great resources and on this too. Mine would be, we have really good frameworks to help us with our understanding of value chains and supply chains and different actors. And also we have really strategic relationships that can be leveraged, like with farmers associations and with different agribusinesses or purchasers and traders and suppliers and processors. So these are all nodes that we're really familiar with that we can leverage and bring in PHL technologies and approaches and resources. So if you're active in agriculture, you probably have a leg to stand on, but need a little bit of support like Lisa's to get going. And at least I'll please.
You give me a chance to promote an idea that I've been badgering the higher ups in government and global agencies to double the size of the extension services everywhere and have just as many people working on post-harvest as in management as in production, and make it an integral part of every single national government's plan to just make sure that those topics were given equal status with production. I told the World Bank that we could start a pilot program for $1 billion if they were willing to give it to us.
Did they give it to you?
Not yet.
Well, fingers crossed. Oh, Paul, please.
I'm going to add a little more there. I think there's a lot of good resources kind of in the theme of really low cost supporting local extension actors, whether they're public sector extension workers or private sector extension or NGO workers. So there are a lot of easily available tools, videos that we use from Digital Green and from Barry Pittendra's shop at Michigan State, so or Purdue or wherever Barry's at right now. So where these tools exist, and there's a lot that can be done with low cost to support extension in this area. And so I agree with Lisa that a lot more resources is needed, but I'm not going to hold my breath until those resources appear. And I think there's a lot we can do right now with very low cost tools, videos, training courses to support workers and give them examples. So.
Paul, you mentioned Scientific Animations Without Borders, which of course focuses on context and ethnicity, language, and gender. There's one more question in the chat box just for our last minute or so here that asks how you ensure inclusivity in post-harvest loss. And this is a question for all of you. How do you ensure that your work is inclusive, considering that market activities are often gendered and associated with ethnicity?
By being bottom up. I worked with the UN Refugee Agency and I created a module for their employees, because if you are the UN Refugee Agency, if you're USAID, who do you think meets you when you go on your trips, right? And basically it's the people who are relatively higher in the power hierarchy. And so one has to really make an effort. And we've created a variety of educational ways in which one can try to be bottom up, and we really owe it to ourselves to reach out to those with the least power, and very often they are women agri laborers, they're women farmers, and so on. And I don't just want to throw this out as a cliche. We've really pioneered an entire education on how to be bottom up, and start with that 2-acre farmer, the woman farmer. In fact, a lot of our work is with women farmers, ADMI funded, and so on. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would emphasize the point of just especially recognizing just how gendered the space is, and making sure for training programs and actors that we're being deliberate about making sure our staffing profiles, that there's women in the team and that they have lead roles, and then in the communities that we're engaging with all the farmers, not just half the farmers or some subset of most vocal farmers.
Wonderful. Well, Madhu, Lisa, and Paul, I want to thank you again for joining us this morning and sharing with us your expertise and your practical experiences with capacity building and post-harvest management. I also want to thank all of you for attending and engaging with us here this morning in this webinar. I'd like to invite you to join us for the third webinar in the series, Food Systems Perspectives and Policy to Address Post-Harvest Losses. This webinar will occur on Thursday, March 24th at 8:30 a.m. Central Time, and will discuss food system approaches to recognizing that problems of food loss anywhere in a value chain may reflect failures and potential interventions elsewhere in that chain. Post-harvest loss prevention requires collaborative research, policies, and implementation that engage with different stages of food systems to reduce losses and promote development. This webinar will bring together another 3 experts who will discuss the importance of food systems perspectives in policy to address post-harvest losses at a national scale. Please do register in advance for attending that webinar, and thank you again for joining us this morning.